The summer months see an influx of arrivals in Kosovo, as many of the state's diaspora return. Official census data shows that over 380,000 people born in Kosovo live abroad. That's more than 20% of the total population. In reality, this number is thought to be much higher, while estimates almost double to over 700,000 people when migrants' children born outside of Kosovo are included. Over 50% of immigrants are settled in Germany and Switzerland, but other European countries, as well as the US, also have significant Kosovo diaspora populations. So why do so many Kosovars live abroad? Emigration from Kosovo is nothing new and has been a fact of life across the whole region for centuries. The first large migration of the post-World War II era occurred in the 50s and 60s. Approximately 200 to 300,000 Muslim Yugoslavs renounced their citizenship and moved to Turkey. Among these masses were tens of thousands of people from Kosovo. Around the same time, Gastarbeiters, guest workers, began making their way to Western Europe from Yugoslavia, including its poorest region, Kosovo. Helping to fill labour shortages in sectors such as manufacturing, by the early 70s, more than 1 million Yugoslav citizens lived abroad. Throughout the 60s, 70s and 80s, thousands of Albanians also left Kosovo and Macedonia to work in private businesses across other parts of Yugoslavia, often as bakers, jewellers or ice cream shop owners. Following the 1981 student protests in Pristina, rising ethnic tensions and political oppression increased migration, but it really spiked during the Milosevic era. Fleeing political repression and dire economic conditions after being dismissed en masse from many industries, Kosovar Albanians poured into Switzerland and Germany. By the mid-90s, it was estimated that 500,000 Kosovar Albanians, 25% of the population, were living abroad. Things only got worse. By the end of the war in 1999, more than 850,000 Albanians had been expelled from Kosovo, with many gaining refugee status in Western Europe, the US, and Canada. But most people returned home in the immediate aftermath of the war. As they did so, fearing reprisal attacks, tens of thousands of Kosovo Serbs, about half of those living in Kosovo, fled to Serbia, and many Roma and other minorities also fled to neighbouring countries. After the war, opportunities for regular migration became limited, and were largely restricted to family reunification and highly skilled workers. Between 2008 and 2014, official figures show that more than 120,000 people left Kosovo. Much of the migration from Kosovo in recent years has been shaped by a huge exodus in 2014 and 2015. During 2014, almost 38,000 Kosovars claimed asylum in the EU, and in 2015 that number almost doubled to over 72,000. Driven largely by economic instability and a lack of faith in the country's institutions, it is thought that about 5% of Kosovo's population left in a matter of months. Many travelled by bus to Belgrade before attempting to cross by foot into the EU at Serbia's border with Hungary. Most asylum claims were made in Germany and Hungary, while across the whole of the EU in 2015, Kosovars represented the fourth highest number of first-time asylum claims of any country in the world, behind only citizens of Syria, Afghanistan and Iraq. EU countries responded with a range of restricted measures. Hungary erected a 4-metre barbed wire fence along much of its southern border as part of wider anti-immigration measures, while Germany declared Kosovo a safe country of origin, making it easier to reject asylum claims in a fast-tracked manner. While the vast majority of Kosovar asylum claims were rejected, and many of the applicants returned to Kosovo, part of the response was to open up new channels of regulated migration. The number of first employment permits issued by EU countries to Kosovars tripled from almost 900 in 2015 to around 2,700 in 2016, and continued to rise steeply in subsequent years. Much of this was due to Germany's introduction of its Western Balkan regulation, which from 2016 enabled citizens of 6 regional countries to apply for work visas, if they had already secured a work contract. Between 2016 and 2019, over 80,000 Kosovars applied for German work visas via this mechanism. This represented around 30% of all applications from the region. However, for various reasons, including long delays at the German embassy in Pristina, only around 20,000 Kosovars, or a quarter of applicants, ultimately received a work visa. Then, in 2020, the pandemic arrived and severely restricted global travel. Only around 800 Kosovars received a work visa via Germany's Western Balkan regulation last year. And while the German government recently decided to extend the scheme until 2023, it has significantly limited the number of visas permitted due to uncertainty around job opportunities amidst a sharp downturn in Germany's economy. But while the pandemic may have reduced Kosovars' opportunities to move abroad, it has had the opposite effect on their desire to do so. According to a detailed survey conducted in June 2020, a staggering 48% of Kosovars said they were willing to migrate, a huge increase on the 39% reported just 6 months earlier, before the pandemic. And more than 60% of those willing to migrate said they would consider doing so permanently. The will to leave Kosovo is particularly high amongst those with scarce income, the unemployed, and people with lower educational attainment, with poverty, poor job prospects, and a lack of hope often cited as the main drivers. But the survey also showed that young urban professionals with higher than average income are disproportionately keen to move away. Such a brain drain has already begun, with hundreds of doctors and nurses having moved abroad in recent years. And last year, Kosovars were in the top 10 nationalities to take advantage of a new German scheme aimed at attracting skilled labour from around the world, in sectors such as engineering and ICT. On average, over 50,000 more people leave Kosovo than arrive each year, with younger people most likely to go. Kosovo's diaspora has a huge impact on life back home, from significant influences on politics and culture to remittances accounting for 15% of the country's GDP. But, in order to secure its future, Kosovo also needs to find a way of making its citizens want to stay.